Hey, welcome everybody to the October 2025 episode of the bi-monthly FRPanorama webinar series. I'm Larry Liberti, and together with my colleague Mario Alanis, as always, we'll be your hosts for today's webinar. And today we'll be looking into the concept of novel approaches to post-approval lifecycle management. And in particular, we'll be looking at the role that Reliance can play in these kinds of activities. Well, as usual, there's a lot to cover today, so we'll keep our introduction short. As you know, FRPanorama is an educational program of the AirUD Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and it's presented in collaboration with the D.K. Kim International Center for Regulatory Science at the University of Southern California, which together bring you the FRPath project. And in particular, we are most grateful for the ongoing support provided by MSD for the FRPanorama series. You know, as the regulatory landscape continues to evolve, the post-approval phase of the product's lifecycle is no longer just about maintenance. It's about strategic optimization, about global alignment, and ensuring continued access to safe and effective therapies. So today, we're going to explore how innovative approaches are reshaping lifecycle management, from streamlined variations to collaborative data sharing. A key theme we'll dive into is regulatory reliance. And that's a concept you are all deeply familiar with, and it's gaining momentum as agencies and stakeholders seek smarter and more efficient ways to leverage existing decisions and data in the post-approval period. But what does reliance for activities such as keeping up with post-approval changes really look like? How can it support efficient approaches to managing post-approval changes? And how can it reduce duplication and foster trust across borders? Well, today, our expert panel will help unpack these questions. We'll share real-world examples and offer insights into how the industry and regulators are working together to make reliance more than just a concept, but a cornerstone of modern lifecycle strategy. So grab your coffee or tea, settle in, and get ready for a dynamic discussion. And let's begin.
Yes, thank you very much, Larry. Thank you very much for introducing this very important and timely topic. And as usual, we have a great panel. Indeed, we are going to explore how to better understand novel approaches for post-approval activities and the increasingly important role of reliance that plays in these activities. For this purpose, we are going to have three great panelists. To set the stage, Samvel Asatian will discuss why we need to optimize the way we manage the post-approval life cycle of medicines. Then we will hear some real-world examples from Mr. Tryphon Octavian Gujema, who will discuss reliance and post-approval changes as an agency perspective from Tanzania. And finally, we will have Melly Lin, who will share with us some innovative approaches to streamlining post-approval regulatory activities. Over to you, Larry. Let's get started. And please remember, if you have questions, post them in the chat. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Mario. Thanks a lot. You know, to get this session started, I'm very, very happy to welcome our friend and colleague, who is well known to most of our audience, Samvel Azatian. You know, Samvel is a global regulatory expert who was instrumental as the Deputy Director of the Scientific Center for Drug and Medical Technology Expertise, originally established as the American Drug and Medical Technology Agency. We know Samvel from his many years in key positions at the WHO, including the areas of regulatory convergence and networks and the Medicines Regulatory Support Program. And there he led efforts to support and strengthen the capacity of national regulatory authorities across WHO member states. So, why we need to optimize the way we manage the post-approval life cycle of medicines is really here to understand what is it that goes behind all of these life cycle activities. So, to set the stage, we've asked Samvel to share his experiences and tell us why we need to optimize the way we manage the post-approval life cycles of medicines. So, with that, I'd like to turn it over to Samvel.
Thank you very much, Larry and Mario and all colleagues. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this distinguished panel. And this is the topic very close to my heart, because during my 25 years of work in WHO, just until last July, my main focus was to develop and advance the concept of regulatory reliance and to implement it in real life. So I'm really thankful to have another opportunity to touch this important topic. So please proceed. This is not the first slide. Yes, yeah. So thank you. And as Larry has mentioned, this is really a very critical topic today, because both regulators, industry, and the public are expecting changes. In one of the recent international conferences of drug regulatory authorities, ICTRA, where the slogan was patients are waiting, one of the participants said, patients are not waiting, they are tired to wait for good products. So this is really the reason why we are now touching this important topic. Next slide, please. So just to give a bit of context and objectives for my short presentation, why we are speaking about the need of reliance in managing post-approval changes. Because there is a very strong need globally for efficient post-approval oversight. And it's really a shared concern for both regulators and the industry. And there is certainly a very important need of aligning with access and innovation goals. And the question is how we keep most important medicines up to date with ongoing scientific progress, but at the same time not compromising supply chains or quality of the products. And ultimately, how the concept of reliance can make the life cycle management more efficient, fast, and most importantly, evidence and science-based, while supporting both access and innovation. Next slide, please. So why this topic is attracting our attention? First of all, because of the increasingly growing number of and complexity of post-approval changes, which include new manufacturing sites. Also, they include updated formulations, and there is obviously a need for of reflecting new safety data through changing the labels. And this poses increasing pressure on both national and regional regulatory authorities and the manufacturers. On regulatory side, it stretches regulatory capacity, which is sometimes already limited or insufficient. For manufacturers, it also forces them to maintain multiple product versions for different markets. All of this together creates a risk of delayed access or supply interruptions. Next slide. So just an overview of the current challenge in relation with this topic. More and more we see resource-intensive regulatory processes, which consume significant time and effort on both regulatory and industry sides. This also creates a situation where sometimes the work is duplicated across multiple jurisdictions, and manufacturers are obliged to maintain hundreds of pending variation submissions by national regulatory authorities quite often repeat assessments which are already done by someone else, sometimes by someone who is more mature and more resourced. And the concept of reliance is not new. It has been implemented, at least from WHO, since 1960s, when first time the concept of certification scheme was introduced. But since then, the application of the reliance concept was uneven. It was well accepted for initial authorizations, but not sufficiently and not consistently applied to post-approval activities. Next slide, please. So the current challenge is related to the potential impact on supply and access. We observe multiple product submissions across countries, and sometimes manufacturers are obliged to produce and supply older versions of medicines for some markets and updated ones for other markets. And this relates to the capacity of regulators and their ability to handle these applications. We also see quite often fragmented supply chains, which complicates the overall supply activities, unnecessarily increases the cost, and obviously it can lead to shortages and discontinuations of supply of very important products. Ultimately, it also creates a situation where timelines are prolonged, and this affects access to most important products by patients. Next slide, please. We are still fresh in memories about COVID-19 pandemic, and I think we will all agree that with all the challenges and difficulties we faced with COVID-19 pandemic, it also gave us a lot of lessons and helped us also to address some of the things which were not really seemed to be solvable before that. I remember also in one of the DIA conferences, someone asked me, what is my main takeaway from COVID-19 pandemic? And I responded that we learned to do things which seemed to be impossible. So we made impossible things possible. And this was the main takeaway from COVID-19 pandemic, for me at least. There was a situation of urgency which drove agile regulatory approaches. And regulators, suddenly they realized that they can be fast and flexible when public health demands their proactive approach or reactive activities. And reliance, the concept of reliance, really enabled timely access by allowing timely approval of vaccines and also addressing the manufacturing changes. But these flexibilities which were introduced, we need to make sure that they become routine. They should not be forgotten. They should not be ignored currently when we are out of pandemic, but they should become a routine. They should become a part of life cycle regulation, not an emergency exception. Next slide, please. So what is regulatory reliance? As I mentioned, in my time in WHO, my team was mainly responsible for development and implementation of the concept of reliance. And in 2021, WHO came with the first formal definition of regulatory reliance, which is the act whereby the regulatory authority in one jurisdiction takes into account and gives significant weight to the assessments performed by another regulatory authority or trusted institution, or to any other authoritative information in reaching its own decision. This last part of the sentence, its own decision, is the most important one, because reliance is not about surrendering sovereignty. It's about building trust. It's about using the information available from a trusted sources to inform your own national regulatory decision. It allows national regulatory authorities to use this information coming from trusted sources, the information which may be in the form of a scientific assessments or other type of information, to reach faster, more efficient decisions while still considering their national local context and their own public health priorities. Next one, please. So then, of course, Reliance is applicable to any type of regulatory activity, but why specifically we have to extend Reliance to post-approval activities? As mentioned already, Reliance is well established for initial approvals, such as, for activities such as marketing authorization, GMP inspections, batch release, even pharmacovigilance, authorization of clinical trials, many other things. But unfortunately, it is underused for variations and lifecycle management, where the regulatory workload is heaviest. I think those who are working with applications, they know, both on the regulatory and industry side, that the workload is not comparable for initial authorizations and for post-approval changes. So addressing and trying to apply Reliance to post-approval activities has very high potential impact on efficiency. It will give some major gains without compromising the oversight, the quality of regulatory oversight. Next one, please. So these are the potential benefits of optimized lifecycle management. First of all, faster access to updated quality products. This is very important expectation for the whole public. Reduced duplication of work. We know how this issue is pressing for all regulators, practically all, well and less resourced. So extra resources are always needed. So, and if you avoid the duplication of work, you can use those saved resources for something else. That is also important in your work. But for these things to happen, we need convergence and trust among national regulatory authorities. You will never be able to use, and you will not be motivated to use the information coming from someone else if you do not have enough trust in that information and in that source of information. But most importantly, also, as I mentioned already, national sovereignty will be maintained, and countries can still make independent national regulatory decisions, but do it more efficiently and in alignment with their trusted partners. Next one, please. But it's easy to say implement, but it's quite difficult to do. And there are implementation challenges on both regulatory and industry levels. At regulatory level, it is the inconsistent use of Reliance. It is not always used. It is used occasionally, but not as a routine. And this was mentioned already. Also, with limited tracking of the timelines for regulatory approval, and different mechanisms for categorization of variations or post-approval changes. And obviously, lack of harmonization and convergence makes it very difficult to rely on each other's decisions and information. Next one, please. And the same is for industry level. This same implementation challenges persist also at industry level. When, like, for example, variations approved by a reference authority, not always submitted to all NRAs in a timely manner. And quite often regulators, especially in the groups when they collaborate within some regional regulatory harmonization initiatives. And I remember good examples of working with AMRH, African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization Initiative, where we were in WHO, we were supporting joint activities, joint assessments and inspections, and based on Reliance. But quite often regulators complaint that industry submits in one jurisdiction but not in the other within the same community. Sometimes there are divergent requirements across jurisdictions. This is also creating quite a serious challenge for industry. Also, there are resource constraints on industry side for global regulatory teams. It's not always that industry also has all the necessary resources for their work. So in this context, better coordination and clearer regulatory expectations are always beneficial and they are needed. Next one, please. So there are some pathways for optimization of the use of Reliance in addressing post-approval changes. First of all, to expand Reliance and work sharing for post-approval changes. As I said, it is still insufficient, so this needs to be certainly expanded. And in this context, I see quite positive the tendency with more and more pilots on implementation of Reliance in post-approval changes initiated by industry. We have seen it in recent years by some of the companies, and I'm glad to see that our colleague Meli, representing Roche, will be here also today, and hopefully she will be presenting their experience in their pilot. Another pathway for optimization is to harmonize classification, definitions, and data standards, because if these things are inconsistent, it will be impediment for implementation of Reliance. Also, we live in a digital age, and digital tracking and transparency also need to be fully implemented with all their potential benefits to help address these issues of implementation of Reliance. But ultimately, as I mentioned, collaboration and cooperation are impossible without trust. So building trust is a critical issue that need to be also addressed. So none of these activities or these options proposed, they require reinventing the system. Just aligning and scaling up what already works, what already exists. Next one, please. So again, something that I would like to bring, as an example from my previous work in WHO, and this is one of my own slides, still since my time in WHO. Some examples of work sharing in practice, where Reliance was implanted in facilitated regulatory pathways, and WHO was really championing in this area by introducing collaborative registration procedure as an example of facilitated regulatory pathway. And I'm sure you are aware of WHO pre-qualification collaborative registration procedure and also SRA collaborative registration procedure. They are very similar. The difference is that only the information, the source of information, in the first one, it is coming from WHO pre-qualification. In the second option, it comes from stringent regulatory authorities, or as they are now called, WHO listed authorities, or any type of reference authority. And we had also a number of regional regulatory harmonization initiatives and networks operating and actively implementing Reliance in their facilitated regulatory pathways. I mentioned already African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization Initiative, but it's not the only one. There are many good examples also in other regions, such as ASEAN project in supporting the implementation of ASEAN harmonized requirements, but also Caribbean health product authority agencies that is also implementing quite an interesting initiative in American region. But there are many others. So the essence of this work is very simple. When national regulatory authorities exchange information and accept shared assessments, everyone benefits: regulators, manufacturers, and ultimately the patients. Next one, please. So what are the enablers for potential success? First of all, what we need is political and institutional commitment. leadership and commitment are critically important from governments, institutions, and partners. Also very important is that legal frameworks allow reliance as a concept to be implemented, because still until now, unfortunately, in some jurisdictions, reliance as a concept is not welcomed, and there are some legal difficulties for its implementation. Transparency and open communication are also essential to sustain trust, which, as I mentioned, is critically important element of implementation of reliance. But also digital platforms and other modern tools must, make data sharing secure and efficient for everyone to be sure that their proprietary data is not compromised. Next one, please. So looking ahead, what we need to do is we need to move toward a future where regulatory systems cooperate rather than duplicate efforts. And I always mention that the time when individual regulators worked alone without cooperating with others is gone forever. Now it is the time for networking and collaboration. We need to move from fragmentation of regulatory processes to convergence and harmonization, and from reactive approach to proactive approach for lifecycle management. And reliance and convergence harmonization are those foundations for a more proactive, efficient, and also more sustainable regulatory ecosystem. Next one, please. And so this is my last slide, some key takeaways for the future discussion. First of all, lifecycle management is really central to access and supply continuity. And this includes also post-approval changes. And reliance is not just a technical issue, it is a public health priority. And today it has no alternative. It is not good to be, but need to be. And reliance makes regulation more efficient and resilient, and by helping national regulatory authorities to do more with their limited resources, while in the same time ensuring that patients get timely access to high quality and efficient medical products. And one important key word here is collaboration, which brings benefits to both national regulatory authority, industry, and the public. Next one, please. And by this, I would like to thank you all for your attention. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you, Samvel. This was what a wonderful way to set the stage and to really show that reliance goes just beyond what we might think about authorizations, but there's so much more that it can be used for, especially in this post-authorization period. So a few questions have come through, and we'll just keep those in abeyance until we just have a little conversation right at the end. But thank you very much. And I want to turn now to our next speaker. Before I do so, I just want to say that if you do have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat, and we can discuss them later in the session. So now we're going to take a closer look at how an agency benefits from using reliance, and in particular, how an agency can optimize the work involved with keeping up with sometimes overwhelming amount of work associated with post-approval changes. And Samvel made a really great case for why reliance is so important in this regard. So to share with us this perspective, we're very pleased to be joined today by Tryphon Octavian Gujima. Tryphon is from the Tanzania Medicines and Medical Device Authority, the TMDA. And as you may know, the TMDA, I think, is a beacon of regulatory excellence in Africa. It's got a steadfast commitment to public health. And the TMA ensures that all the medicines and devices and diagnostic tools that are used in the country meet rigorous standards of quality and safety. It's internationally recognized in terms of a WHO ML3 status, which is brilliant. And I think this reflects several decades of leadership and dedication to protecting lives. And this is really important for an agency to have made this kind of a commitment. So from his position as the Drug Registration Officer in the TMDA, Tryphon today brings us some very practical insights as he discusses Reliance and post-approval changes and his agency's experience. And this is kind of a view from an agency about some work that we will also be talking about in just a little while, as Melly talks about some pilots and other kinds of interesting, innovative approaches to using Reliance in the post-approval period. So I'll turn it over to you, Trifon.
Okay, yeah, good. Of course, to me it's now evening. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, if it fits to everyone. I think you can hear me well and see me.
Yes, very good. Perfect.
Okay, nice. So as I was introduced and I introduced myself, that my name is Trifon Octavian Gujema, a pharmacist working with TMDA as a drug registration officer. Yeah, we are dealing with all these types of pharmaceutical products, including small and large molecules, new application of renewals, queries, and variations. Yeah, as speaker introduced TMDA, TMDA is responsible for regulation of medicine in Tanzania. And we thank our experts, like we are now maturity. Of course, there is an agency which is recognized by WHO as a maturity level 3 authority, and we have been maintaining this status since the 2019 up to date. Of course, we are struggling to be ML4 and later on WLA. Yeah. So the first next slide, please. Oh, is it me? Actually, okay, fine. So the first speaker, Dr. Samvel, speaks a lot. So I think I'm not going to talk about what was spoken, but I will focus on areas whereby TMD has put much effort in cognition of Reliance's procedure in terms of documentation and how the approval process is. So, as you can see, my contents, what is Reliance and why this was already been spoken. So, bullet number 2, TMD guidelines, its objective and how it works. I'll talk about it. And what are the reference institutions where we can rely the information from. Remember, the first speaker talked about the issue of trust. So, how is trust and who will be trusted? So we are going to see who are they, and then benefits of using this guideline, and then what is the evaluation approval process under Reliance. Of course, we have one product I will show you, then implementation and challenges, recommendation and conclusion. So as I said, I'm not going to read about the definition of it, but this point, using trusted regulatory output of others while keeping owners solving it. This is very important. I'm sure even Dr. Samuel spoke about this. Like, despite using Reliance, but still the NRI, respective NRI, has a capability or capacity to decide, and it has all powers. So, slide number 7, TMD guidelines on Reliance approach. After recognition of the importance of Reliance, so TMD has just recently, it was July this year, published a guideline numbered the TMD DMC MRI G022 revision 0, still new, which can be accessed under this link, whereby it explains all procedures for Reliance. So if the applicant wants to register a product in Tanzania via Reliance, he has to pass through this guideline and see what is required, and he has to fill the declaration form so that we as assessors or as regulators, we know like this application is submitted, but the applicant has committed to submit this application under Reliance procedure. So in the guideline, there are requirements, what to do, what form to fill, what to submit, so forth and so forth. So the guideline intends to guide the applicant on the requirement and review pathway for marketing authorization of, in the meantime, of human medicinal products through the Reliance approach, including also variations. But as I said, it's for only human medicinal product. The objective of the guideline is normal: to streamline regulatory decisions, accelerate access to medicine and vaccine. This, of course, is the role of Reliance. Strengthen confidence in national decision while preserving sovereignty, very important. Also promote regional and continental cohesion. So what is actually done when an application is submitted under Reliance? So it has like 1, 2, 3, 4 steps. So we do verification of what has been submitted, like if the product is approved by EMA or US FDA or any other WLA authority or country, or ML4 country or 3, we need to see evidences. So we call verification. What are the evidences provided by those agencies and the approval document? So we do verification. Then we do a bridge review or a bridge assessment. Like we are not going to do full assessment, so we just check and balance to some sections of the dossier, especially for those which are regional required, like the labeling is specific, or even the indication, the age group, what type of diseases do we have such kind of public problem, so things like that. Then we recognize everything that was submitted, then we issue approval. So during verification, we confirm the sameness, no reassessment or redoing of the work. So, and here we encourage that whatever has been submitted during Reliance at the owner's count should be the same submitted to Tanzania or to TMDA, so that we become so much trustful with the documentation. But if you bring quite different documents, like what was reviewed, let's say, by EMA was different from what is submitted to TMDA, so it's very challenging and very difficult to see whether this is the same document or not. Then partial review using trusted authority, we said recognition, full acceptance, and reference authority decision. So currently, this guideline is responsible for marketing authorization of human medicinal product. So what are the reference institutions whereby a Reliance can be applied? So the guideline, as I said, applied to new. First of all, it is applied to new chemical entities, and of course, generic medicines for human medicinal products that have been approved or registered by either we ourselves, TMDA. In what scenario? Like, let's say we have a product Y, which was evaluated and registered by TMDA. Containing, let's say, API source X and the FPP source, let's say, Z, a certain brand. And now the same product, maybe due to business expansion, there's another marketing authorization who submit the same product, but we're using different brand name, but it's the same product from the same API source, the same finished manufacturer source, composition, manufacturer, everything is okay. The only change is just the brand name, just to have multiples of the same product in the market. So we can also use Reliance because we are the one who approved the product. And if we do verification and coming up with decision like this product is not different from the one we approved, we can also use Reliance. But sometimes also we may find the product X is registered by applicant Y, and later on the same product X is registered by applicant, let's say, Z. So it's just a matter of administrative change. So we can also write TMDA's approval process. Now we have also AMA, African Medicine Agency. So wherever product that has been, or vaccine that has been approved by AMA, we as TMDA, if such submission is coming to us and the applicant declares you want to use Reliance, we also rely on the assessment reports and decision that made by AMA, because some of us at TMDA also are responsible for evaluation of those years submitted to AMA. So we also trust each other. EMA, we know, is one of the stringent regulatory authority in Europe. So whatever product which is registered under EMA or by EMA, or sometimes any European country which is stringent with regulatory authority, and the applicant declares to apply this application under Reliance, we can also rely. WHO as well, or any NRA who is maturity, WHO maturity level 3 or level 4, or WHO listed authority, we also can accept Reliance. EAC, medicine recognition harmonization, IGAD, SADC, MRH. Of course, we are also under SADC, Tanzania also under EAC. So, and other recognized regional harmonization initiatives. So, whatever products come from these areas and the applicant declares the interest of registering this product under Reliance, whether it's a new application, whether it's a variation, we can always accept and follow the Reliance procedure. During implementation of these guidelines, of course, it is still, as I said, it is still under NRI sovereignty. That means the responsibility and decision-making remains to NRI. Of course, data confidentiality and effective information sharing. Sometimes we find some of the applicants do not share everything because of the confidentiality issues, but we need to trust each other because we are regulators and you are the manufacturers. So you have to provide all information so that we have to avoid those unnecessary queries. Also, it requires trust. This is normal, and transparency. So, what are the challenges? Of course, a number of applicants or manufacturers have attempted to use this procedure, but we encounter some challenge during submission. We have, I'm sure, and every agency has respective guideline for submission of a certain application. So despite like you are following Reliance procedure, you have also to compile information as per the existing guideline of the respective NRIs. This is one of the very important thing. You submit your Reliance documentation, but you have to also to abide with what is required, what is prescribed in the guideline. Also, you have to provide all evidences, approval evidences that were approved from the recognized regulatory authority, RRIA. As I said, what are these recognized regulatory authority? Yeah, those which I mentioned, those recognized reference institutions. So please, if the change is approved by EMA or USFDA or any other CRA country, please share that approval letter. Please share that assessment report, all those assessment report. If the change underwent a number of queries, series of queries, please, if possible, make a summary and include the submission of those responses, Q&A responses, so that we can be sure of what went through. Because we are now using something which is hidden. We are not in the process, but still we rely on information. So please bring information as enough as you can. Of course, there is also differences in inequalities in terms of human resources, technology, and these priorities and other related systems. You may find that a certain change has been undergone due to advancement of manufacturing process or equipment, and you may find that that change, which is submitted, let's say, to a certain NRI or let's say TMDA, you may find that there is an incapacity of translating the information because they are not used to that technology or not used to that new advanced technology. So this, I think, it cut across globally. So what are the take-home message from me or from the authority? Yes, we should not become overconfident, especially for the applicant. Like, if you know that you have applied for, let's say, you have applied for variation via Reliance procedure, so don't be overconfident that this change is going to be accepted. And if you get something out of that, now things become worse and complaining sometimes. Remember, sovereignty must be preserved, so it is an NRI to remain accountable for the decision. We need to do like this. We like what we are doing now, regular stakeholder engagement and communication, like what we are doing now. The submission must ensure local needs in our language or in a respective language, which is well understood, and also health contexts are still considered. Also, the public interest for the healthcare system. You may find that you are applying for Reliance for a certain, let's say, indication, but this is not a problem of the country or not the public. So sometimes you can get rejection, like, we don't need this indication because it has never happened in our societies. So it's very important. Not all decisions from foreign regulators may align with countries' public health priorities, as I said, or legal frameworks. So you have to be flexible. As manufacturers, applicant have to be flexible. Whatever can come back, and be ready to work together. So if additional data requested, if your submission is found with deficiencies, please, the MAR must lead to provide those information. So flexibility is very important. As we said, it is still the responsibility of the NRI to give decision on the reliance. Conclusion. Yes, we really appreciate the procedure. It saves time. We are also having limited human resources. So these products are also needed by patients. So Reliance procedure is very critical in global recognition. Safety, effectiveness, and quality assured of medicine is enabled. Reliance medicine regulation plays a vital role in strengthening health system, especially in resource-limited settings. Also to promote global collaborations. Reliance is about trust, check and balance, science, and cooperation. Of course, trust, we need to check and balance. Of course, science is still there. Maximize limited resources while preserving sovereignty, support better public health outcome by ensuring timely availability of essential medicine and vaccine, particularly during health emergencies like during COVID-19. Dr. Samville spoke well about this. Then this is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tryphon. It's been a great presentation and very illustrating to learn the challenges faced by an agency that I'm sure would be interesting for discussion shortly. Now, let's take a look at this topic from the point of view of a pharmaceutical developer. Recently, an important pilot project was undertaken with the participation of many international pharma companies and regulatory agencies around the world. This pilot was designed to see how Reliance could streamline activities around post-approval challenges. And for this purpose today, we will be joined by Melly Jean, who has had many variety of responsibilities within Hoffmann-La Roche. A lot of them have been with issues related with post-approval change management, but her overall experience is more than 20 years in regulatory affairs. And I am sure that her deep understanding and her deep experience with national, regional, and international regulatory issues make her presence perfect to introduce us to the point of view from a developer of innovative approaches to streamline post-approval regulatory activities. Melly, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you, Maria, for the nice introduction, and also thanks for the organizer for inviting me to this distinguished panel. It's really my great pleasure to share with you our experience and learning regarding this critical topic. Okay. So you will hear about the innovative approaches Roche has already been experimented to streamline post-approval change globally. So as already introduced by the previous speaker, Reliance is not a new concept because it has been implemented for decades, because no one agency, no matter how big, can do it all by themselves. Reliance can really benefit regulators, industry, and most important, our patient. So industry, we are strongly committed to leverage Reliance as 21st century regulatory tool and support the global implementation of Reliance. So with this, I'd like to introduce our first PAC Reliance pilot, which is still so far the largest pilot run by industry with 48 national authorities leveraging EMA's assessment report. This pilot received great support by EMA and WHO. So the change in the scope is a major drug substance process change for a monoclonal antibody to address the supply chain challenge. So the idea for this pilot we brought to the national authority around the globe is to file one standard document, one standard dossier, which is EU dossier. And we offered them provided them the EMA's CHMP final assessment report and Q&A to support their assessment. In the meantime, when joining the pilot, we also asked the health authorities not to raise country-specific requirement and also waive the local testing. Last but not least, to follow one review and Q&A timeline. So the goal for this pilot is really to reduce the global approval timeline for a similar change from 2.5 years to 6.5 months. So also through this pilot to enhance transparency and build trust with regulators. So globally, through our affiliate around the globe, we reached to 84 national authorities impacted by this change, and 48 of them agreed to participate in the pilot. Need to mention that most of them haven't built the Reliance pathway in their local system. This really shows a strong interest and willingness from the national authority around the globe to bring Reliance into action for post-approval changes. So by today, like you can see the data to the right side, that by the target approval timeline, which is 6.5 months, we got 83% of country approved. So at the end of 16 months, we get 100 country approved. So there's one country drop out from the pilot because due to business reason, we decided to withdraw the product from the market. And we also compare this pilot approval timeline with historic timeline for similar type of changes. You can see here the blue bar represents the pilot timeline. Our orange bar represents the average timeline for similar type of changes. So overall, we can achieve 56% reduction in the approval timeline across all the countries, which enable us to implement this change over 2 years ahead of the projected timeline, which is a big win for the company, but most important for the patient, because this can enable the uninterrupted supply for our patient through the globe for these important medicines. And another thing we brought, something new also to this pilot, is also the first time for us to use a cloud-based data and information exchange platform to enable greater visibility and transparency, which means all the participating national authority were able to see the question they raised for each other. They raised to Roche at real time and also see Roche answer. So we also gave flexibility for them. They can either choose to upload their question to the Cumulus platform, and we will also upload the response directly to the platform. So, or they can use their traditional approach, send a question to our Roche affiliate, then we will also upload the questions and answer to the platform to enable all the health authority can see the questions and answer in the real time. So you can see that 35 national authorities who joined the pilot actually registered in this platform, which also shows a great interest of the global national authority to use the digital platform to enhance transparency and efficiency. And the success of this pilot also confirmed by the national authority by their response to our survey. You can see that 64% of the national authority confirmed they achieve 50 to 80% reduction in their review timeline, with 12% of them even achieve above 80% reduction of the timeline. And all the national authority would like to participate again in the Reliance pilot. Definitely, this pilot paves the way for efficient use of Reliance for the post-approval changes. So as I mentioned before, both EMA and WHO, they provide us a strong support for this pilot, which is also a key factor for this success of this pilot. And EMA even like publish on their website some guides to industry how to apply for pilots, and also invite industry to apply for similar type of pack reliance pilot. Currently, I think there are 12 pilot, either 2 of them completed, 10 are ongoing. So this sounds really great and wonderful, and because we really achieve a much shorter timeline. So you may wonder, can Reliance alone address all the challenge we are facing for industry? Yeah, unfortunately not, because you probably often heard about industry complain about the challenge to bring the new technology to the implementation. So I like to share also with you a very interesting case. So we plan to implement a new state-of-art platform analytical technology, right, to 18 of our products, the same technology. So for each product, there are over 120 countries approved. So which means if we want to implement this new technology, we have to file globally over 2,000 applications. So this is just a rough number. Consider that many countries, each strand, you need to submit an application for each strand. So the number of products is not just 18. So imagine such a high amount of application to enable the, such a state-of-art new technology. So that is also why many companies are hesitant to implement this new change. Because on top of that, consider the timeline. It takes up to 3 years for global approval for a new analytical method for each product. And on top of that, many countries have their country-specific requirements. This is a super complex situation. And of course, Reliance can help a lot, but how we can make the situation less complex. And we are thinking about another tool to address that. So this is ICH Q12 tools. It's a post-approval change management protocol. It's not a new concept. This tool has been implemented by US FDA since 2003, already over 20 years, by EMA since 2010, and also adopted in WHO variation guideline for both biotherapeutic products and vaccines. So this has already been used for over 20 years, right? So what does it mean for this tool? What can it bring? Traditionally, normally you receive a variation from us, from industry. So this is a classic approach. In the application, this include both our change strategy and also the result of the study to support the change. So this all included in one package. We submit to you in one step, you'll give us approval. So what are the steps? What are the, how it will look like if we use the PSMP? So this will become 2 steps. So at step 1, we only submit the strategy, which includes the description of the change and the gap analysis, the risk assessment, and also we will list the detail what kind of study we are going to conduct to support this change. And also, most importantly, the acceptance criteria for each of the change. They will be submitted as a protocol, right, to the health authority. The health authority approves this protocol. Then later on, when we have the data, we can submit it through a step 2, just to submit the data. So you may wonder, this is more complex because now we have 2 steps. But the magic thing is that by using the PSMP, the national authority, when they approve us with the protocol, they can also allow us to downgrade the gene change in the step 2, which means, for example, you submit the protocol as a prior approval, then at step 2, you may downgrade it to a type 1B change or even an annual reportable change. So this enables the implementation step once the data is available much faster. So this is the biggest advantage of this protocol. So how we can apply this protocol concept to the complex case, which I just described. Let's see how this will work. So imagine now, if we want to submit this change impacting 18 products, Traditionally, we need to submit each change to 18 changes to one health authority. Let's talk about one health authority. So this health authority need to conduct 18 independent review and give us approval. So globally, for each product, it takes over 3 years. And if we use the PSMP, so at step 1, we submit a multi-product PSMP, multi-product protocol, which means this protocol will list all the common parts, which includes the core validation data, our validation strategy and plan. This common protocol is applicable to all the products, because imagine this is like a platform technology, right? The core part and also our strategy is exactly the same. So for the national authorities, they only need to assign one reviewer to review this multi-product PSMP. Then the result will be automatically applied to 18 products. So this means a lot of saving for the review results from the regulator side. They don't have to repeatedly 18 times to review the same content. So at step 2, so once the product-specific data is available, we only submit the data individually to each product. Most importantly, because step 2, we can get the downgrading of the reporting from type 2 change, maybe to a downgrade to a notification, which enable us to implement the change immediately. So this sounds great, but how we can scale up this strategy at global, at globally, because only if every country can accept this strategy, this will apply, right? So that is why we need to use the most important tool, that is Reliance. So the idea is that at step 1, we'll first submit the multi-product PSMP to the reference country. Then after we get the assessment from the reference country, we start a Reliance pilot. We'll submit the same multi-product PSMP and also the assessment report from the reference country to the other health authority who rely on its review. So for the international health authorities, they also get the opportunity to review this protocol to learn how a reference agency, for example, EMA, reviews such kind of protocol, makes a decision. And ideally, they can also follow the same downgrading agreement, same as the reference country. So then let's go to the PSMP step 2. So then we need to submit product-specific data to the reference health authority through the downgraded reporting category. So once we get the assessment outcome, we will submit it to the national authority through Reliance again, right? Then they can also apply the same Reliance principle and also apply the same downgrading reporting category. If this can be achieved, we can really bring a new technology implementation from 3 years to immediate implementation. So this is a big gain for both regulatory authorities, because you can save a lot of resources to the industry to bring the new technology to the market as soon as possible, and also benefit our patient. So with this, bring to my last slides. So Reliance is absolutely needed for the global changes to enable uninterrupted supply, and also enable us to bring the new technology to the market as soon as possible. And PSMP can be a powerful tool to facilitate multi-product changes, and also can reduce a lot, saving a lot of resource and accelerate the implementation. But it only works if it can be accepted globally. That is why Reliance here plays an important role to enable the global acceptance of PSMP. Transparency is the key, because in our pilot, we share the same package as EMA. We share EMA's assessment report and Q&A, and also all the national authorities can access to the Q&A in the real time. This really helps a lot to build the trust with regulators. At the end, I'd like to encourage everyone to engage in pilot to drive the transformation from pilot to the routine practice. By being together, we are paving the way for the future. Thank you for your attention.
Melly, thank you very, very much for that. That was just an inspiring presentation about how you can combine the PAC and Ps together with Reliance. So building on what we've seen before in these previous presentations. It's just great. I don't know if we can have others participate, but we have a kind of a comment that's come in from one of the listeners, and they, I think, hit the nail on the head with this. They thank us for having this discussion about the challenges, what they call facing a complex regulatory compliance issue. And so, Melly, what you've talked about is a beautiful, beautiful way of using technology and using Reliance to address this complex issue. But for both you and Samvel, I'm wondering, is there a step before this that we should be thinking about, which is how do we uncomplicate the process? How do we make sort of systemic changes to the process in addition to using the technologies and these wonderful pilots and approaches and Q12 and these other tools? Is there an opportunity for us to think about the way that the requirements are and the processes have evolved to where they are today? And you've each touched on these. And I was wondering, part of that, there's a questions come in, does the WHO have guidances with regard to PAC harmonizations or variations? So kind of a way of just thinking more broadly. And Samvel, I'll start with you if you have any reflections about the process. And then Melly, if you have any thoughts around this.
Yes, thank you very much, Larry. And indeed, this is a very pressing issue and very critical challenge. And indeed, WHO was heavily involved in addressing this challenge at the conceptual level. There was a guideline issued by WHO regarding post-approval changes, which was mainly related to biologics. And I know there is a work going on now, although I'm not there anymore, to extrapolate this to the whole spectrum of medical products of all kinds. So to address the challenge, I think from what I feel is important is that we need to make a cultural change, because what I mentioned in my presentation is that so far there is no 100% acceptance of Reliance as an important concept that must be introduced. Still, there are some hesitations and reservations in full application of Reliance, especially in low and middle income country settings. For some reasons, in some situations, Reliance is considered as a sign of weakness, which is not at all true, because in the reality, implementation of Reliance is a sign of strength. People may be surprised to know that Reliance was first introduced by very well-resourced regulatory authorities, for example, in European setting. But of course, in the context of low and middle income countries, there is also another specific challenge, is that sometimes policy makers or decision makers are hesitant to promote the implementation of Reliance, because they believe that if regulators use someone else's information, they don't need to be paid by the state. So simply they say, okay, if you use the information from others, why we should pay you? We will only pay you if you generate your own information, you invest your own brain and efforts and energy into this process. If you use someone else's information, then we will pay you less. And this type of simplistic thinking is sometimes considering as a very serious impediment for implementation of Reliance. So for it to be fully implemented, first we need to ensure that there is a cultural change for Reliance to be fully accepted. And then all the necessary technical things will come. They are not very difficult. So most difficult is to change, the thinking behind. And if we are successful in making it, then all the rest will be much easier.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Right, and this whole culture change and trust is all tied together. And Melly, what's been your experience with regard to actually a comment that's come in is that how can we reduce the number of variations to be submitted? And I think they're also in this comment talking about what you've done, which is to put some risk-based assessment behind these and to tier them in a way that then removes some of them from the need to put a lot of effort behind them. So final thoughts to you, Melly.
Yeah, so the first part, I cannot agree more with Dr. Samuel said about this mindset change, right? I really like one of the quoting from Martin Harvey, who is the head of international affairs in EMA. He mentioned that Reliance is not outsourcing decision, but insourcing expertise. So you know that among all these 12 ongoing pilot, so the PAC Reliance pilot, actually we, from all the different companies, we achieved already like 77 national authorities participate at least one Reliance pilot, which shows a great interest. However, when we talked with them, we realized that some of the health authorities, they don't even talk with, like inside their agency, they don't share this their experience. So if they all can share their positive experience join those pilots, they can also become a strong advocate for this culture or mindset change. And another thing regarding what you said about risk-based decision for the change management, I think like really WHO play a super important role to have this global standard, which is a variation guideline for both biotherapeutics vaccine, and also this guideline is currently under being updated and to combine into the same one. So I think this risk-based concept also can help regulator to better plan their resource. For example, for the minor change, you don't have to wait still like 6 to 12 months to give the approval. For the minor change, you can allow the industry to implement it and then review later, submit later, because this can also save a lot of resource. Consider most of the variations we submit to the national authorities are minor to moderate change. So if they can really put their resource more on the high risk change and relieve the resource for the minor changes to really take a risk-based approach, this can also definitely increase their efficiency.
Yeah, just focus those activities, right? That makes a lot of sense. Well, as always, this has been a fun and very informative session. Thank you all. Today we covered a lot of ground, and we'd like to leave you with our typical recommendations about an activity that you can consider, you as a participant today, undertaking when you leave this webinar, and to help you and your colleagues think about the importance of this area. So, as you heard, seek out political, institutional, and other leadership commitments to apply Reliance within your legal frameworks, and encourage the use of secure and efficient digital platforms to support these transparent communications. So try to get involved. Second, the use of Reliance helps regulatory decisions and contributes to checks and balances. We've heard so much about this, and all of these processes support PACs and the respective NRA's needs to actually use Reliance pathways. And finally, as you've heard over and over today, if there are pilots and you think it makes sense, both from the standpoint and from the standpoint of the agency, please engage in those pilots to drive the transformation into practice. So thank you very much. And remember, a recording of this session will be archived shortly on the FRPath.org website, where you can find all of our previous 3 years worth of sessions on the website. We're sure that you'll use the observations from today and that the conversations have been helpful and informative. Our last webinar of 2025 will be held on Tuesday, December 16th. And we're looking to this to explore what we think is a fascinating topic, what we're calling the use of altruistic regulatory pathways to expedite the optimization and availability of important new medicines, kind of a unique subset of Reliance pathways. As usual, the free registration will be available at the FRPath.org website and through our LinkedIn and email postings. And remember to check out the resources at FRPath.org, where you can find a lot of information about Reliance and other facilitated pathways. So to conclude once more, Mario and I would like to extend a very, very special thank you to our guests, to Samvel, to Melly, and to Trifone for their thoughtful contributions today. So Mario and I thank you for your interest and participation. All our best until we meet again.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.